All join palms. And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Put palms down. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. How are you all doing? Just trying to wake you all up. Nice to see you all here. Anyone here for the first time? You didn't even take your hand out of your pocket to raise your hand. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to let you know it's cold in here since you're here for the first time. Sorry about that. The heat should kick on any moment. What brings you here?
That's a very long story.
It's only an hour class. So.
In summary, going through, a very challenging time in life, so hoping to get some silence and prayers and community.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone else going through challenging times? Bunch of liars there. Who else here for the first time? What brings you here?
My son has been here before.
Yes.
I came over from Virginia to visit him. And we are also Buddhists.
Yeah.
But we Buddhists from Laos and Thailand.
Beautiful.
But he recommended me to come and take a look on this temple.
Thank you.
So we can have a happy life.
Yes. It could only be that simple, right? Just to have a happy life. Well, we're glad you came here all the way from Virginia just to see us, and the benefit you get to see Tim as well, I guess. He's a good man right there. Yeah. Anybody else here for the first time want to share why they're here? Or anybody keep coming back want to share why they're here? Yeah.
I have no choice. My family, my kids are telling me every Tuesday it's Tuesday. Because obviously, in the last 5 years I've been here, I'm such a better mom, a better human being, a better everything. So I'm coming. It's wonderful.
That's cool. So they're not just sending you out so they can have the house to themselves.
Yeah.
They're also, because they're how old, like 12 and 14 or something? 10 and 14? 12 and 15, yeah. So it's not just so they can get mom out of the house and be alone. It's also they recognize the change in you from this practice. Yeah, that's cool. And how does that make you feel?
Great.
Yeah.
So, it's working. It's worth it. It's all of it. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a definite party going on at your house every Tuesday at 7 p.m. They have built that into their schedule. So I'm glad you're all here. This practice really is, for me, the happy life. That's what this practice is about, is cultivating a way of life where you're happy. And that's not always so easy. And, the core Buddhist teachings really address why we're unhappy. And sometimes that can be a little difficult to begin to explore. if we start to ask ourselves, where is this unhappiness coming from? Sometimes we don't want to sit with that answer because it really forces us to reflect on where's the discomfort, where's the anger, where's the sadness, where are the expectations, where are the cravings, where are the desires, these things that sit in our mind and our hearts all day long that cause our suffering, taking us away from a happy life. So Buddhist teachings really is an opportunity to really just hold up a mirror and reflect back on your own greed, own anger, own ignorance, and ask yourself, and then be okay with that. Learn to be okay with the fact, like, yes, these are my actions, this is what's causing my suffering. Embracing that, accepting that, welcoming that, and then working on transforming and changing the way we think and the things we say and the things we do. And that's what we mean by practice. There's the intellectual study of Buddhism and meditation, and then there's the practice piece. And the practice piece isn't just here, it's in other areas, in every area of your life. Because that's where we want to see change. Right? So in order to do that, we have to change. Now, if you're all perfectly happy and nothing's wrong with you, then you don't need to change a thing and you're good. But chances are we still have some work to do. So we'll start with the meditation practice. To those of you who are joining virtually, welcome, glad you're here. Feel free as you have to introduce yourself, say hello. There's a chat box on the screen somewhere. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice when you don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Are you doing it right? Are you doing it wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of chaos. So posture, you want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're seated, just try to relax your shoulders, sitting up straight. If you need to move, simply move and return to stillness. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return to breath. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, resting, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's not from anything I said. It's not from how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's not from the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens. More reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond every other 20-minute period of your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. But meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, and becoming fully aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. Fully aware of every intention, every action. That's the practice. It's not an escape, as often people think it might be. It's direct perception into the present moment. And very often that present moment is incredibly difficult and challenging and confusing and complicated. So we learn to be with the present moment as it arises. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. That's what the Buddha taught. Regardless of the emotions or sensations or feelings that arise, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, and you just sit with it. And that's it. And once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate all the people and places around us, we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets a little simpler. But it is a practice. This path can be a really beautiful way of life if you slowly integrate it into your way of life. And for many people, Buddhist teachings are quite opposite of what most of us have thought and said and done our entire lives. You have to remember that while most people, especially here at Dharma Bum Temple, don't come here as monks or nuns, the Buddhist teachings is a renunciate path. And so it's understanding what are the things that keep us in samsara, in the cycle of rebirth, in suffering. What are the things that keep us there? To be mindful of all of our cravings and desires and what keeps us stuck. And so, for me, my master always taught the renunciate path has nothing to do with being a monk or a nun, but it's your way of life. And what thoughts and words and actions can you renounce? Can you move away from? And the question really is to ask yourself, well, what thoughts, words, and actions cause you suffering? Or others suffering? And when you explore this, you begin to understand how to make changes around that. You know, it's not about, okay, in 6 months, can I become enlightened? In 6 months, can I figure all this Buddhist stuff out? It's just a slow, one moment at a time, one breath at a time, one day at a time practice. But it really does start with getting to know your thoughts. And the sad part is, for many of us, that's the scariest thing there is. But can spend our lives running, but then you get tired. So learn to sit. And I don't mean just sit in meditation, but just to be still and just observe. So with that, I'll pause. For me, I really just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that you're sitting with, and we'll use the rest of our time this evening to open up to questions or thoughts. And if you are joining virtually, again, welcome. There's a chat box there on your screen, so feel free to type in questions there, and I'll do my best to respond as well. So, questions?
What does the Buddhist teachings say about the power of positive thinking as opposed to negativity?
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. I spend a lot of time around someone all day long that's very negative or looks at things in a very negative way instead of a positive way. And I'm trying very hard to reinforce myself so I don't allow that to affect me.
So just to kind of clarify the last part, the way I heard what you say, it's almost as if you want to create a shield from the negativity so it doesn't influence you.
By thinking that, yes, the power of positive thinking is going to somehow get me through it.
Yeah. Okay, great. So a couple things with this. Understand whether you view things positively or negatively. And I'm coming at this from a very traditional Buddhist lens, right? Not kind of a Western psychological, let's all be positive and rah-rah and hug each other and think everything's going to be fine. Looking at it from a very traditional Buddhist lens, there is no positive thinking or negative thinking. There's just thinking. There's just speaking. There's just actions. We give them meaning, right? So two things, and that's why I asked that follow-up question. There's two ways to look at this. One is when you have been, and this is for all of us to ask ourselves, if we have ever been in a moment of pain, suffering, anguish, sadness, misery, depression, what are our thoughts typically in that moment?
Not healthy or
not healthy, not positive, right? So when someone else is that way,
we can feel sympathy.
We can feel sympathy, we can feel empathy. We begin to understand that when other people are thinking, saying, or doing things that are, to use the words, negative, understand that they're coming from a place of suffering. And I know this isn't really the nature of your question, I don't think, but I'm just pointing this out for everybody because we all deal with people who are incredibly negative throughout our day, whether it's people we know and love, whether it's strangers, at the grocery store, whether it's people in traffic, whoever it is. We are constantly surrounded by people who are incredibly negative. And when they are that way, it's important to understand that they are that way because they're suffering. And so this is where the Buddhist teachings is to overcome this suffering and this anger that these individuals are feeling. We practice having compassion for them. So what this allows us to do is, and there's a couple different ways to go with this, but instead of seeing or hearing or feeling the negativity and trying to make it and trying to be positive around it, see and feel their suffering. And one could say that being positive is very compassionate, which it is. So it's one thing if you want, and I'm just rambling here, not even specific to your situation, but it's one thing here if we want the other person to be positive, It's another thing if we want to kind of protect ourselves from their negativity, which is also very common. And in that situation, the way to protect yourself, that's why I asked that question, is to see that their negativity is coming from their pain. And as soon as we see their negativity, we feel their negativity, we feel their suffering, their pain. If we make it about us, then we want to try to be, oh, should I be positive or should I be negative? But then what we've done is we've taken their mess and made it about us. It's not easy to do, right? But it's always about them first. Because when we're suffering, when we're being really negative, that's what we need. Is that love, is that compassion, is that kindness back towards us, not more negativity. And again, this isn't your question because you're asking about, okay, is positivity going to, in a way, change them or change the situation? You don't know. It could. Someone could be really negative and you could be really positive and it can be even more annoying. You know? We've all been there too. You know, they're one of my favorite Zen expressions is to a worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish. So if this person or these people or people we interact with are in a real negative space, and we try to bring, you know, light and beauty and everything to their life, they might not be ready, nor do they want to see it or feel it. And then they may even feel worse because they're in such a bad place and we're trying to bring them up and make them feel, you know, something positive and they just don't want to hear it. So I have no idea if that answered your question.
Well, it sounds like kind of the direction I was thinking in my head was just realizing this person is going through lots of pain and be compassionate and sympathetic toward what's going on and actually hearing or listening. But there is still that feeling of wanting to protect myself from
Definitely.
it.
Yes. And that's, you know, and again, in a very practical, logical sense, I went with the non-practical, logical sense first. But in the very practical sense, yeah, there's only so much we can take.
Right.
You know, and I've talked about this a lot in, you know, abusive relationships, toxic relationships. You know, it's one thing to, you know, practice all the Buddhism in the world and love and care for the person that's abusing you. But then there's a line there that shouldn't be crossed where we must say, I'm not able to handle all of this. And there's no Buddhist practices to stay in unhealthy, toxic, abusive relationships. Get out. That's the wisest and most compassionate thing. You know, so I think understanding your limits is important. And when it does really affect you, you know, try to maybe remove yourself from that situation for a little bit. Walk outside, step away, you know, take a few deep breaths, calm yourself down, and then re-engage. You know, if it's in that moment, like in that, you know, situation where you're able to kind of step away for a little bit and just calm down and then come back to it. So, yeah. Other questions?
Or any thoughts regarding when you're experiencing a major loss due to death, something you know, losing somebody and suffering and trying to run away from it versus moving towards the suffering and letting yourself feel pain?
Yeah. So just to share for those virtually maybe didn't hear it, are there any thoughts around dealing with death and loss, the suffering that comes along with it? You know, do you run towards it? Do you run away from it? What do you do with it? You know, first is, as we know, we all face it. And there's a Buddhist sutra teaching where a woman lost her child and she went to the Buddha and asked him for help if she could somehow, you know, if he could somehow rescue and save her child. And he said, I want you to go to every house and collect a mustard seed from the house that has not known death. She came back with not one mustard seed. And what he wanted her to first understand is that we all experience death and loss. The Buddha said very clearly, we have birth, we have aging, we have sickness, and we have death. Now, very often people who are, I'm not saying you, but just those who may be newer to Buddhism, think that it's this very kind of cold thing, that when we lose people, we're not supposed to feel that. No, if you lose someone and you don't feel it, there's something else going on. Death is as much of a part of life as life is. And when we lose loved ones, family, friends, animals, it hurts. There is no simple answer or solution to this question around death. And interestingly enough, you said you run away from it, you run towards it. Don't run. Be with the pain, feel the pain. When we feel pain from losing loved ones, that's beautiful. Not the loss, but the pain we feel. The pain we feel is an expression of the love that we have for that individual or animal or whatever it might be. That makes sense so far? There's another beautiful teaching from Thich Nhat Hanh who talks a lot about no birth, no death, no coming, no going. And that when we think of people in our lives, where do they live? Like, what makes us love them? Where do they live? Within us. Where? Say again? Heart?
Yes, sir.
And? Mind. People don't need to be here physically to be alive in our hearts and in our minds. We've never lost them. So, I really do believe Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings on death and loss are beautiful. He gives a great metaphor that I'm not going to attempt to retell, and I'll just let you Google it. But he talks a lot about clouds and just the clouds and the rain and everything just constantly changing forms. And the Buddhist lens, the Buddhist teachings on rebirth, reincarnation, is that we all come together for a period of time. We have physical form, we have consciousness, it's called alaya vijnana. In the Buddhist teachings, the storehouse consciousness of all of our karma. And then when the physical body dies, that consciousness continues on. So therefore, it's a sad but beautiful thing to feel that pain and be with it. Yeah.
Do you mind saying the name again slowly so I can?
Thich Nhat Hanh?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's the Vietnamese Buddhist monk who just recently, about a year ago, passed. And sorry for your loss if you have any in your pain or anyone else is dealing with that right now. Other thoughts, questions?
I don't know if this question is gonna make any sense, but also dealing with loss in the family, is there any teaching about how to talk to children about Buddhism? And like, is there some way to?
Yeah.
I mean, my kids have come here a few times and we do practice meditation, but like, how do we, I don't know.
How do you teach them?
Yeah.
So it's funny, is the question around, any teachings around sharing Buddhist teachings or practice with children. I have kind of a funny take on this and then I'll give you an actual answer, but, or response. Most people in this country who come into Buddhism are not Buddhist, right? We can see thousands of people here and you'll see probably 5 of them that are actually Buddhist. They're Christian, Catholic, Muslim, Jewish, pagan, whatever it might be. But people in this country come into Buddhist practice later in life, didn't grow up Buddhist. What are often many of them doing? Running away from what? Religion. So and we've been running a family song and introducing Buddhist practice and meditation to children since 2009. So for the last 14 years. The last thing, this is just Jeff's personal opinion. If you want to introduce Buddhism to children, the last thing you want to do is introduce Buddhism to children. Because then all you're going to do is raise all these kids, so then they're going to become teenagers, and they're going to run away from Buddhism and go to something else. Not because there's anything better or worse in any religion, simply because some parent was pushing it at them. Which is what ended up with how a lot of you ended up here, right? The best way to share Buddhist teachings with your children is to embody Buddhist teachings in your life. Let them see it. It's like Alice said, you got your kids kicking you out of the house to come here because for the last 5 years, it's made her a better human, which makes her a better mother, which makes her relationship with kids and families stronger. That's how you introduce it. What we often want to do, and again, I'm not saying you, but we often want to just kind of pass things off to like somebody else to teach our children certain things. We own that. That's on us. Right? They follow and they model everything that we do. They really do. So that's the practice. If you want to share Buddhism, not just with kids, but with anybody. Buddhists are not on street corners like holding up signs saying, come join us. Buddhists don't care if you're Buddhist. They just want you to be kind and gentle and happy. It's like somebody asked the Dalai Lama years ago, does this country, the United States, need more Buddhists? And his answer was, the world has enough Buddhists, right? We don't need more Buddhists. This country needs more people who are peaceful and happy. That was his message. So, be that person. Yeah, and let them see it in you. But if you throw a bunch of Buddhist books at them, when they turn 15, they're going to be thrown back at you. Yeah. What else? Thoughts, questions?
I just want to say I've been coming to meetings for the past few months, and I'm really grateful for this community. I think it's makes it a lot easier to prioritize this practice in my life.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you sharing that. Yeah. Yeah, it can change in profound ways, right? It's really crazy how it happens. See what sitting and doing absolutely nothing can do for you? Thanks for sharing. What else? Thoughts, questions?
It's a little personal. Have you ever been to the Plum Village in
Yeah.
France?
Oh, no, sorry.
You
I'm not.
never-
I'm very familiar with it, but I've never been there. Yeah. Oh, is that it?
Yeah, that's
Oh, yeah.
then if you would have said yes, I would have said.
Oh, have you been?
No.
No. Yeah, so Plum Village, so I mentioned Thich Nhat Hanh earlier, the great Vietnamese Buddhist monk. He's done, it's not fair to say one person has done more for Buddhism in a country than another, but, the likes of Thich Nhat Hanh, Dalai Lama, people like that have really transformed Buddhism in this country. And, having to flee Vietnam and being here, he built Plum Village in France and Deer Park Monastery, some of you know of or have been to. That was his monastery that he built here in Escondido. And like I said, died about a year ago. He had a stroke maybe 3-4 years ago, roughly. So really drastically altered the remaining years of his life. But even then, he would still communicate and smile or draw certain things. It was really quite beautiful to see, even post-stroke, how he handled sharing the Dharma and the teachings with his community. But at the time, Martin Luther King nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize for his work with social justice around racial injustice and oppression. And he really created what's known as engaged Buddhism. And engaged Buddhism really is about understanding these social, environmental, economic, political issues that surround us today, and all the injustice and suffering in the world, and using Buddhist practice to transform first yourself and then bring that into all of those areas. Because so much of what goes on in this country around the world is filled with greed, anger, and ignorance. And that's the root cause of Buddhist teachings, and as far as the suffering. You know, that's really what it is. It's our greed, our anger, and our ignorance. And he wanted every individual to explore that in their own life and then bring it into the world. So if you've never been to Deer Park Monastery, please Google it. Go. So they have a pre-pandemic, it was open all the time. Now you have to RSVP. It's still open, but they have what's called a day of mindfulness. They do them about once a month right now. You do have to RSVP, and they sell out pretty quick. But if you just check the website for when the next ones are coming up, and it usually starts around 8:30 in the morning and go to about 2 in the afternoon. And it's a beautiful meditation and talk and walk outside, and they call them the brothers and sisters, the monks and nuns. You know, they're just the happiest people. They'll hug you and everything. You know, it's kind of fun. So, yeah. And I'm sure Plum Village is just as equally gorgeous. It's just a lot further than Escondido. Other thoughts, questions?
The Buddha lesson said we have to respect five precepts.
Mm.
Why the Putin kill a lot of people?
Why the who kill a lot of people?
Yeah, even the children,
yeah.
they don't know anything. Why they kill?
Yeah, that's a good question. For those who are not familiar with precepts, at the time of the Buddha, they had anywhere from 227 to 311 precepts. And the precepts, it's important, and then I'll get to that question. I just want to give some context for those who might not be familiar with precepts. The precepts, it wasn't like the Buddha sat down one day and said, I'm just going to make a list of rules that you all must follow. The precepts were put in place that as the Sangha gathered, the community of monks and then nuns, the disciples, as they came together, things would happen that would cause conflict, strife, discord within the Sangha, within the community. So precepts were put in place to make sure that there was a healthy Sangha, healthy community, that they could thrive and live in harmony and peace together. And there's actually what's called the Vinaya, which is the code of conduct. You can look up and see every precept and the reason it was created, right? So I think it's important to understand that first. And I also look at precepts as red lights, right? If you're driving, come to a red light, you have to stop. Sure. All the time. Do you have to stop? No. Where the troublemakers at? Come on now. You don't have to stop. But you do. What happens if you run a red light?
Well, for the safety of everyone around you, basically.
For the safety of everyone around you, basically, meaning if you run the red light, what could happen?
Depends on the situation.
No, hang on, you're all jumping ahead. You watch Judge Judy, you don't know where I'm going with this, right? What happens if you run a red light? Accident? Nothing? Ticket? Lots of things could happen, right? So the red lights are there to protect us, to keep us safe. They even give you a warning light. There's a yellow light that says, yo, the red light is coming. So they even warn you. But you're on your own with red lights. You can do whatever you want. You can speed through them and maybe get where you're going quicker. But you also run the tremendous risk of harming yourself or harming others. But you all have that free will, free choice. Precepts are the same thing. They're guidelines that have been set up for people to follow, because that was what would keep the community safe. The first 5 precepts, and it's too late now to get into an in-depth discussion on the precepts, but the first 5 precepts that are taken by monks and nuns and lay Buddhists is to refrain from, first one, harming. Often referred to as killing, but it really comes from the term harming, to refrain from harming, right? To refrain from stealing, to refrain from lying, to refrain from sexual misconduct, and to refrain from intoxicants or anything that alters the state of mind. So refrain from lying, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and intoxicants. You know how fun it is to lead this discussion with college kids at San Diego State twice a year? That's their entire life on a college campus, right? So that's the precepts in brief, right? The first 5. The question is why? Right? Why is there so much harming? And if you look at the root of Buddhist teachings, the 4 Noble Truths, the first ones he says is life is filled with dukkha, suffering. The second thing is, what's the cause of suffering? Greed, anger, and ignorance. And the answer, unfortunately, to your question is why so much killing is because people, children and adults, and the children get it from the adults, are filled with so much greed, so much anger, and so much ignorance. There's so much hatred in this world. There really is. That's the sad reality. Now, to keep us all from being completely miserable and depressed, and this goes back to your kind of question, we also recognize there's tremendous beauty in the world. And that, at least for me as a practitioner, keeps me, I have 2 choices. I can look at all the pain and suffering and misery in the world, and that can destroy me. Or I can look at all the beauty and joy and kindness in the world and understand that's there, and understand that what the world over here, filled with greed, anger, and ignorance, needs is more loving kindness, more compassion. But there's only so much every individual can do. People make their own choices. And, I've worked with a lot of people. I've done prison work for 20 years, working in domestic violence shelters, people who've been abused, grown up, physically, sexually, emotionally abused. I've sat in psych units in prisons with people who've murdered, people who've raped, people who've done tremendously horrible things. And none of what they've done is right, but most of them have also been victims themselves of tremendous pain, tremendous torture, tremendous trauma. And so there's a vicious cycle that just continues. And somewhere along the way, they need more love, more kindness, more compassion. And if we do that for, the next 27 generations, we might make a difference. Yeah. So, yeah, for sure. Anything else before we close? Everybody good? All right, so we'll join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So before y'all head out, our wonderful Dharma Bum host Eddie has a few announcements for y'all. Sit tight, you don't want to miss them.
Hello, everyone. My name's Eddie, and I'm tonight's Dharma host. We opened the Dharma Temple 16 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those that show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and are not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of the practice with others. Almost every night we have different classes led by people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery song that meets several times a week for anyone battling addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 5 p.m. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We also have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you enjoy it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out. Thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thanks, Ed.